Okay, I have 11 o'clock, so we'll get started. The information I have for you this morning is kind of near and dear to my heart, but I don't have a lot of information, so I'm hoping that you don't mind if we finish up a little early. So our session this morning, our webinar session, is called Bullying, What It Is and What It Is Not. And I am Jen Hagerman. There's my information there if you need to contact me. Just a little bit about myself. I spent the past 22 years as an emotional support teacher for the Lincoln Intermediate Unit. I have taught emotional support in both public schools and outside of public schools. And the keyword bullying was it was something that I didn't go a year without having to deal with. We would start in the beginning of the year with some bullying sessions, and by the end of the year, we were still having issues with it. So something that is kind of prevalent in all settings. Little note, I don't know if some of you attended my last session, but as I said, I was a 22-year ES teacher, and Friday the 13th of March was my last day as an ES teacher, and Monday the 16th was my first day as a tax staff developer, which was actually the first day of school closures. So I try not to take that personally. I'm not sure what happened there, but everything in my world coincides with some strange happenings. So we have our Zoom webinar meeting norms that we're going through in each session. Just engagement, we want to let you know that engagement looks different for everyone. If you want to put your video on, you're welcome to. If you have other things going on and you need to put your picture up, that's completely fine too. We want to honor all perspectives. We don't all come from the same background. We don't all have the same opinions, but we want to honor the perspectives of everyone and assume good intentions. We all come to the table with the same thoughts in mind. We want the best for our kiddos in our classrooms. As far as Act 48, you've been reminded a bunch of times, and I'm going to remind you again. If you were one of the first 100 and you're hoping to get your book, please make sure that you complete your evaluation by Friday. If you're not one of the first 100, you still have a chance in getting it if someone doesn't complete theirs. And then also just, we are looking at those evaluations, kind of looking to what we can do for the future. We're thinking about making this kind of an annual thing, bringing in some big speakers and having programs. So the more feedback you can give us, the better our programs will be. All right. So our webinar outcomes for today. Just to develop an understanding of the true definition of bullying and investigate some intervention strategies for those. All right. So in 2014, the Centers for Disease Control and the Department of Ed released the first federal uniform definition, just looking at the core elements. So these are the things that they have to include. So for bullying, it has to be unwanted, aggressive behavior. It has to be an observed or a perceived power imbalance. And that's kind of a piece there that a lot of people struggle with. Observed, I can look and see physically if one person is bigger than the other. But there's this perception on the part of the victim as to whether they feel that there's a power imbalance. So that really has to be investigated. And then the final piece that has to be included is the repetition of behaviors or the likelihood of repetition. So it has to be more than a one-time thing or the probability that it will continue. So some key points here. Bullying, it is targeted, it is intentional, and it is repetitive. So again, following with the guidelines of the definition. So it is a pattern of behavior that harms a child. Okay, so bullying in itself can take many forms. We have the verbal bullying, which we think of the name calling and things. We have social bullying, physical bullying, and cyberbullying. And we'll look at each one of those a little more in depth here. So for verbal bullying, we're thinking of the teasing, the name calling. This would also include the inappropriate sexual comments that are happening, taunting, things like that. So that would be all considered in the verbal bullying realm. Our social bullying, and this is kind of one that we don't often think of, but deliberately trying to hurt another's reputation. So a lot of times we think about this when it comes to cyberbullying and things like this, but it could also just be on the playground or within a school setting, within a classroom. So spreading rumors, repeatedly excluding someone. So playing a game every day at recess and this student just isn't allowed ever to play that game. Telling others not to be friends with someone. This is nonstop. But we need to think about it. I mean, I can think of students in the past where, you know, today at recess, well, you know, Johnny said that, told Billy not to be my friend anymore. Well, okay, that's not nice. We'll talk to everybody about it and then we'll move on. If every day Johnny is telling Billy not to be my friend anymore, and he's continuing, he goes around and tells more students not to be friends with this student, then we know that it's targeted. This student is being excluded repeatedly, and then it becomes a form of bullying. Physical bullying, very self-explanatory. A note here, research shows that boys are more likely to participate in physical bullying than girls. I know when I look at the things on the internet and you look at the YouTube videos, we see a lot of the girls that are becoming more and more physical, but typically it is boys that participate in that physical bullying that is repetitive. And then we have the cyberbullying. So this would be any form of social media using the internet. A lot of times the kids are on the Snapchat and all of the Instagram, things like that. But just that rumors and those insults are spread quickly and they are all but impossible to erase. That stuff is around forever. So if this form does happen, it is really hard for students to overcome that level of hurt that they feel, because that information is always out there and you never know who got that information. So a point to remember here, and this is one of the pieces that I struggled with over and over and over with the students, is there are certain behaviors that you would consider a bullying type behavior. But if it's not deliberate or it's not repetitive, it's not necessarily bullying. I had a lot of students who their key term, they would come in from recess, he's bullying me. Well, let's talk about what he was doing and whether that really is bullying. The problem we ended up having was a lot of students would go home and use that same terminology with their parents. And then we would get the phone calls, the administration would get involved, we have a bullying situation. And it was really hard to explain to the parents the difference between conflict and drama, which happens all the time with our students, and what bullying really was. I know as a parent, if someone told me that my child was being hurt, I would have a hard time hearing that my child wasn't being bullied. But I felt that it was really important then to work with the students on their level to understand what bullying is and what it's not before the message inadvertently gets to their parents, and then I have to explain to their parents that it wasn't bullying or something like that. So it's important to kind of do this teaching early, make sure that the kids understand one from the other. So here's the idea of not bullying, and you will see some of these same terms are what we used in bullying, but you got the idea that it was targeted and repetitive to be bullying. So excluding someone, saying they can't play in the game, that's not bullying. Disliking someone, accidental physical harm, being bossy. This is a lot with our younger students. We have younger students that are, well, you need to come over here and you need to do this and you need to, and then someone will say, well, he's bullying me. Well, no, you just have a bossy child and we need to work on that. That's something we need, a strategy we need to come up with and work with that child on, but it's not a bullying type behavior. Telling a joke about someone, and arguments. A lot of times arguments, if someone perceives that power imbalance, they'll say it was a bullying situation, but it's just simply an argument. So here's a chart that I have used in the past with some of my students. just kind of looking at the different behaviors. Does it fall into the category of really bullying? So in the situation, if we come up with a playground situation and everybody's playing the game and Billy was told he can't play the game and he's sulking off in the corner and he says the kids were bullying me. Okay, well, first of all, Billy, let's look at this. Is everyone having fun? Is anyone getting hurt? Is everyone participating equally? Well, no, everyone's not. Is nobody having fun? Well, some of the kids are out there having fun. Is someone being hurt on purpose? Well, yeah, they told you couldn't play. Does it cause you to be upset? Yes. Did it just happen today? Or does it happen every day? If it just happened today, well, that's a mean moment. And maybe we need to talk to the other students about what they said or how they handled it and why it didn't make Billy feel good. But it's a moment in time. It's not a bullying situation. So being able to look at a chart sometimes and show the kids exactly where that situation falls is easier than just some adult saying, oh, you weren't bullied. So coming up with some interventions, these are some things that I have done in the past, some strategies that some of my coworkers have used. I will tell you this first one actually came from my own children's school, from their guidance counselor. It was a program that, or a lesson that they taught with them, and I've used it over the years and I really like it. So first of all, we'd start off just talking about the difference between conflict and bullying. And the idea that every student, every year, and at many points throughout the year, is going to have a conflict with a peer. You're going to have disagreements, you're going to have arguments, and you have a choice. In those disagreements or arguments, you can choose to deal with them in a positive or a negative way. Then helping them to understand that bullying is really that repeated action over time, where the person has that imbalance of power, they have difficulty defending themselves, and just that harmful behavior. So there is actually a chart, and I have linked here, you on the matrix have access to the handouts, you have access to this presentation, so you'll be able to click on this. And when you click on it, you'll see, this is a very small picture of what you'll see, but it is a chart. And actually I can click on it for you. It pulls up this chart, and it's just helping the students to recognize the difference between conflicts and bullying. So is there equal power of friends, or is there an imbalance of power? Does it happen occasionally, which means it could be more than once, but not all the time? Or is it repeated? So just looking at the differences and deciding, is that behavior really a bullying type behavior, or is it just a conflict I'm having with a peer? Okay. This is a chart that I will keep right on my desk. If I have students that come to me and we talk about the behavior that happened, we can refer to this at any time. We've gone over it in the beginning of the year, so it's a familiar chart with them, and then we can go through and look at that. It's also something that I send home to parents. October is bullying month, bully prevention month. We would do some lessons around it in school, but I would also send a packet home with parents. And I would give them just a real quick blurb on the front about how we know that conflicts arise with our students, and they will throughout the school year, and that just to help your kiddos at home to refer to this chart whenever they're having a struggle with a behavior or with a peer. If they come home to talk to you, maybe you want to refer to this with them, because we will be referring to it at school also. So that would be the second step that I would do with them. And then finally, we would do some social stories. And this is just an example. I would read one or the other to my class, and we would talk about the behavior and if we felt that it fell under the conflict situation or if it fell under the bullying situation. So just some real quick, easy social stories. A lot of times we would actually go into real teachable moments with things that were happening with the students in the classroom. Okay, remember when so-and-so yesterday got upset when someone threw a pencil across the room? Well, how did we handle that? Was he bullying you when he did that? Or was it just a conflict? Was he just mad at you because you were making noises and you wouldn't stop? So using real life situations to kind of help them see the difference between a conflict and an actual bullying situation. Okay. So intervention idea number 2, this is something that, this is just some information. If you get on Teachers Pay Teachers, you can find everything under the sun. This is something, I'm crossing my fingers it still exists. I pulled this when I worked with high school age kids, which was at least 10 years ago. We would do some class discussion. Again, I was in an emotional support setting, mainly with high school aged boys. They weren't real big on getting up in front of the class and doing presentations at the time. They would discuss in small groups. We would sit in a circle and we'd have discussions about, a lot of times about real life situations that had just occurred and talk through them. But for the most part, these were our journal writing assignments. I use these as journal prompts, different days. And just what would you do situations. So I would give them that as a prompt and they would give me some sort of an answer. And I'll tell you, at times I would set a timer and I would also use this as the progress monitoring writing tool. So you kind of have to double duty when you're short for time. So we had our what would you do situations. And then, there we go, some talk about it situations. So these would take it a little bit more. So for instance, talk about a bullying or mean behavior you've seen on TV and other media. So we might discuss that as a group, throw out some ideas, and then they could write about, do you think a scene like this really affects kids? Why or why not? You know, I had a lot of students who would be like, nah, it's just TV, who cares? Other kids would be like, well, yeah, I'd want to get that kid. I want to get it back. You know, it really would help us. It would start conversations. And again, some kids weren't willing to talk out and things like that, but they could write it in their journal. All right. So this is another activity that I have done with my students, and I would like to do it with you if you are willing to participate with me. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. If you could find for me a sheet of paper. So if you could find a nice clean sheet of paper, it could be even a little sticky note. If you have a sticky note next to you, but if you could find me one that is not wrinkled, is clean, is pretty nice. So if you can have that somewhere, I'll give you a couple seconds to find one. Okay. Okay, so here's my sheet of paper. All right, so I would give my students each a sheet of paper. I would give them, you know, nice clean Xerox paper because they were never allowed to touch my copy paper. But I could give them this nice clean sheet. It was perfectly clean, and you can see mine actually has writing on one side, but we're going to pretend it's not. So what I would ask the students to do is to take this piece of paper and crumple it all up. So we're going to start by just smushing it all together. Okay, so you're going to crumple your piece of paper. And then think about the things that happened to you today. My kids wouldn't get up. They wouldn't. I'm going to squeeze that paper harder. I'm going to smash it harder. And then I might even tell my students to take the paper, put it on the floor, and stomp it real hard. Smash it as hard as they can. Okay? So your nice piece of paper should be in a ball right now. All right? Now I would tell my students, apologize. You just took a perfectly good piece of paper and it can't be used now. So the students would laugh and they're, okay, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. I didn't mean to smush you. I didn't mean to crumple you. You know, I didn't do that. Didn't do it on purpose. I won't do it again. And then I ask them to unfold it. Unfold our piece of paper as best we can. Okay. Now unfolded our piece of paper. Okay. Now, if I pretend, smush it out, lay it out as flat as I can, I need to use this paper. It's not going to go through the copy machine. I've apologized to it, but I haven't taken away any of the scars, the creases, the crumples that the paper has in it. This paper will always have those scars, those crumples, those pieces in it. So telling the kids, you know, there are going to be times where you may hurt somebody with your words, your actions. and it's right to apologize, but to recognize that just your apology might not take those crumples or those things away. Another situation would be if you're seeing someone get bullied. This is how they could end up. You stopping it or preventing it after the first crumple, they may only have a few scars, but if you let it continue to this point, you end up with a lot of scars, a lot of hurt. And then the flip side, I mean, I've also had kids that said, yeah, but you know what? It's still a piece of paper. It's still a piece of paper. I could draw on it and I could doodle it, which is true. I've had kids look at it from that angle of, it's not completely ruined. It might not be used for the purpose you initially intended, but it still could be used. It's still a piece of paper. So it still can find great things and be made into wonderful things. I had a student make a paper airplane out of it and fly it across the room. And he said, you know, even though it was crumpled and even though it was hurt, it still became something amazing. So you can use this example a lot of different ways in a lot of different classrooms. And I use this, like I said, in secondary and in elementary with my kiddos. I did include, I don't necessarily need to make you sit and watch it, but there is a YouTube video here with a gentleman who does this activity. And then he kind of does a magic trick at the end. So I am going to try to play it. I'm going to cut out the beginning because he does exactly what we just did, but he kind of does something really cool that I can't. So I'll show you that part real quick.
Now this is, some of you have already seen this on the internet. This has been very popular.
So if we go through, he helps this girl, he tells her to stomp it, and they talk about the paper. And
we have
then
the paper here. This paper is even flimsier than the other paper. Okay. Two different colors. I'll tell you what. We're going to tear this paper up. Well, before we just step on it, I'm going to give you two. Let's just tear it up. Let's just tear it up. Tear it up, James. We're just going to tear the whole thing up. There we go. Tear it up there. Now, let me see. I think your pieces too. There we go. Oh, good. Yeah. And we've torn this paper up really good. And as you go through life, guys, even if you're, hopefully you're never bullied, but even if you're not bullied, you're going to see other people that are bullied. And you're going to see a lot of situations where you may need to step in or you may need to tell somebody. And just remember, that's what we're here for. We need to go out and we need to lift each other up. We need to be kind to each other. We need to say nice things about each other. You need to stand up for your friends. And if we all do this together, eventually we'll be able to possibly stamp out bullying. Give her a big round. That's the end of the stuff.
So that all came from the Ripple Kindness Project. You can actually look that up. That's originally where the crumpled paper, they initially started it with a heart. They would take a heart piece of paper and they would do that with them, but it's just a really good example you can use with our students and go a lot of different directions with it. But I have yet to master the whole magician act at the end. I have not figured that piece out. So if you do, more power to you. So I know I told you the information I had for you was kind of brief, and I apologize for it being a little short. However, we have plenty of time if you have any questions or anything that any questions that I may have brought to you, or if there are things you'd like to share. I'm happy to give you some time to do that now. You're welcome to unmute yourselves or drop things in the chat. And Christina, I don't know if you've been monitoring the chat for me, but I don't know if there's any questions there that I haven't answered.
I have a question.
Sure.
In the chart that you showed us about the conflict and bullying, is it supposed to say equal power of friends or equal power or friends?
It is probably, let me pull it up here. I think it actually, in my mind, I use it as or. So if you have equal power and you have equal, a group of friends that are all equal, That's the way I see it, but you could use it either way. I mean, this is just a chart that I used. Like I said, I adopted it from my daughter's school, but you can turn it into a document and use it however you want.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a quick question about teasing versus bullying, because sometimes kids accept teasing because they're enculturated. They say, oh, everyone's saying this about me, especially if they're a minority student, I found. And then it's really hurtful, and it's really hard to help them self-advocate. So how do you help kids navigate the difference between those two?
So I would do something very similar. If that was a prevalent issue in my classroom, I would do something very similar with pointing out some exact examples of one or the other. I think sometimes pulling that student out of the situation, maybe doing smaller groups and doing even the activity we just did, change it from the idea of bullying actions, but teasing. What does teasing do to you? An activity where you might show the other students that, you know, you think it's just teasing, but it actually is hurtful. And it's something that that student internalizes and keeps forever. And then with that student, I think just a lot of pointing out. I had the best success when we used real life situations. We might not always use names, but we would use, you know, I saw a situation in the cafeteria today where someone said such and such. You know, how should we handle that? How should we work through that? You know.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is sometimes I see teasing that I think is bullying, but when I speak to the student privately about, they're like, it's okay that they call me something that could be potentially a racial slur, or, you know, that kind of thing,
Right.
or about their religion, or about, and so that makes me uncomfortable as an adult. But of course, I can't put myself in the, you know, I've got to advocate for what the child feels. So
Right.
just, okay.
Yeah. I mean, anyone else is welcome to chime in here if you have ideas too, but I just, a lot of times, I mean, one of the things that I hit on just in my last presentation was your relationship building. So if you're working on building that relationship with that student, being upfront with them about how it makes you feel and what you are perceiving, and that if they ever feel that it's reaching that level, to please share with you. You're happy to help, you're happy to be involved, but you know, just that support for that student, build that relationship with them so that if they ever do, or maybe they don't want to tell you right now, but at some point it gets to the point where it's enough and they can't handle it anymore, that they're willing to come to you and share that with you.
Yeah. I usually just tell the students, I also use that paper crumple, and I teach that to all the students. But I also say that, like, no one has the right to make comment on your body, your religion, where you live. We kind of go over that, what you wear. I'm kind of laying that groundwork that's not fun teasing.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to Jen that had mentioned the relationship piece. That's the really important part, because you also have kids, many students, I also work in emotional support, who are actually affected, but they're not going to tell you that if they're not really close with you. So if you don't have that relationship built, they don't want the other kids, because they feel like, oh, if they see me, like, you know, saying, yes, I feel bullied, then it's just going to be even worse for me. So, you know, it's just really important to be able to have a really close relationship with them, and to pull them at times where other kids aren't going to notice, or providing ways like, you know, a box outside your office door, they can draw a little picture or write a little note, or, you know, like just making kids really aware that you're really there, and it doesn't have to be blown up into a big thing. But, you know, it's important to talk about your feelings in authentic and real ways, that helps them get those feelings going and sharing.
Excellent. And Jennifer, I see your comment here about the resiliency skill at the end, to use that paper. That it's kind of, you know, when that occurred, when I was upstairs and that occurred, we kind of, you know, just went off on that tangent with the resiliency and how they had seen that. And I remember thinking to myself, geez, I wish someone in my past year had come up with that. But a lot of our teaching is so situational. We have to go with the moment and where those students are. So definitely is, like Courtney just mentioned, being authentic, being in the moment. Does anyone else have anything they want to share or any questions you may have? So I just want to remind you, if I can get through my slides here. There's our schedule for the remainder of the day and the sessions that you may want to attend. And again, anything on the evaluation to help us for next year or to help us in the future would be very helpful. So anything you can provide, any information, things that resonated with you or things that you know you have questions about. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I appreciate you joining us. Thanks for attending my bullying session. Bye, everybody.